When the new Hollywood came about, your Scorseses and your Coppolas and your De Palmas and your Friedkins and your Ciminos, they really kind of bought into their own press. This kind of swinging dick, auteur theory, two-fisted filmmaking.
The 70s were kind of the Wild West. People love hearing stories about William Friedkin firing a gun on the set of The Exorcist. It would just take one tweet to come out of a production of someone just firing a gun to get a reaction from somebody else, and then that director's career would be over.
They were pushing boundaries. They were pioneers of cinema.
There was a lot of belief in these auteurs who were creating beautiful art, but at what cost?
Certainly there's a culture that's happening in the 70s that is letting these guys run wild. And we got a lot of great films out of it, but you also get a lot of mishaps.
The incident on the set of The Twilight Zone always stuck with me. Film sets are controlled chaos. I've been here at Blumhouse for about 4 years now, and I've been on a fair share of sets, and it is really interesting to see, you know, how many precautions are made. Someone's got to take a slight step backwards down a staircase, and we've got to do a bunch of safety meetings. And for good reason.
For all the coincidences that have to be connected to give life to these cursed legends, the Twilight Zone accident sort of lays that all bare. It's just something horrible that happened.
I'm Stephen Farber, a film critic and co-author of the book Outrageous Conduct, Art, Ego, and the Twilight Zone Case. John Landis and Steven Spielberg came up with the idea of this anthology film inspired by the Twilight Zone TV series, which had a real cult following.
You unlock this door with the key of imagination. Beyond it is another dimension, a dimension of sound. The Twilight Zone.
The basic idea of Landis' segment was just for this bigot to experience prejudice in these different settings and to get a sense of what the people that he had maligned would go through. Vic Morrow, who was the leading actor in this segment, he wasn't that impressed with John Landis, but he was impressed that Spielberg was involved with the movie, and he needed a job. Frankly, his career had not been going that well at that time. John Landis had had a very big box office success with Animal House. He had a somewhat less, but still success with the Blues Brothers. This was the auteur era where directors were really granted carte blanche. There was not much oversight by the studios.
I met Frank Marshall years and years ago. I built a relation with Frank, and he called me up and he says, you know, I'd like you to be involved in more of my pictures. And Frank had offered me The Twilight Zone, which introduced me to John Landis. I sat down with John and we started to discuss how we can create those worlds, and it was very important to be as realistic as possible. We found the back lot of Universal for the European street, also for the cattle car, and creating that scene.
The studio felt it would be better if he learned something from this experience that would redeem the character. So Landis came up with the idea of the Vietnam sequence where he would save the lives of 2 Vietnamese orphans who were in danger. I think Landis was considered to be talented, but erratic and not the most mature in judgment or the most responsible in terms of filmmaking. And several of the crew people were concerned about his cavalier attitude towards safety.
One of the scenes is Vic Morrow's running through the jungle, coming through the greenery of Vietnam, which I filled in. And he is being shot at. To get the realistic feel of them being shot at, before the bullets go off, he is pulled off out of scene, and the bullets shoot, and they rip the shit out of the greenery, the palm fronds, and the whole thing. Well, they used real bullets that night. That was something that John insisted on doing. John called me into his office and said, we're going to go to Valencia. And we drove through this area that did have aspect of a jungle. So I was walking by myself, and there was a stream and a large cliff on the other side of the stream. I went over to John, and I brought him over to the stream. And I said, John, I see a village over there. He said, what are you talking about? So I said to him, if you agree with me that we shoot the set in one direction only, I will build you a village if we always angle the camera in one direction as we dolly back. He said yes. And I went back, did a little research, and I built that village. The set was unbelievable. It was Vietnam. That evening, I was approached by many of the top people in Hollywood, putting their hands around me and saying, this is remarkable. How does it feel to be in the big time? The scene, basically to lay it out for you, was Vic is coming into the village, a helicopter comes in, he picks up the children, comes up to the water's edge, and then runs towards camera, saving the children. Excuse me.
It was illegal to work children after, I think, like 8 o'clock at night. They wanted it to be done much later to have an authentic night scene. And when the casting directors heard what the scene entailed with children in the vicinity of explosions underneath a helicopter, the casting directors said, this sounds like a dangerous scene. So Landis said, we'll get them off the street ourselves. A number of people made remarks that if they were hiring the children illegally, and if they found out about the explosions, we're going to be sent to jail.
We did a lot of tests where the helicopter comes down, how high it is, where it is positioned.
They had done an earlier scene without the actors and the children, just kind of testing some of the things out with the explosions and the helicopter. And the helicopter was rocked violently by these explosions. And the people in the helicopter said, gee, that seemed kind of rough. And John Landis is reported to have said, you think that was big? You ain't seen nothing yet.
My name is Kane Hodder. Among other things, I've been a stuntman for almost 42 years and played Jason in several of the Friday the 13th films. Sometimes things just happen on sets. I can tell you any number of times I've done a stunt where something happened that I really didn't expect. Like, I did what's called a pipe ramp. It's where you take a car and you hit a pipe like this and makes the car go like that, fly in the air. I did one of those on Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. As a stunt coordinator, I placed where the cameras would be safe, and just so happened when I hit the ramp, it just happened to hit, so it kind of flipped like that and went quite a bit further than I anticipated. You know, unfortunately, things at times just happen. So, 1977, a local reporter wanted to do a story on me for the Reno newspaper. And I said, you know, if you want, I can do a fire stunt for you live. I still don't know exactly what went wrong, but I suddenly burst into way more flames than I was expecting. I panicked. I ended up having what they said was 45% third degree, which is a lot. The next 5.5 months was spent in the hospital, going through tremendous amounts of pain and psychological stuff, I would say. Later in my career, I started doing fire stunts again and became kind of known for it. What you do as best you can as a stunt coordinator is try to avoid anything that you can think of that could possibly go wrong, but knowing there's no guarantee of anything.
Here's what's happening right now. We are locked down with camera. The stuntman is prepping, and then we're gonna light him on fire.
Make a dollar bet. Yeah, man. All right, I make a dollar bet saying that this sucks.
Action, PJ!
Nothing could be that good. Nothing could be that unbelievable. Not since the Vietnam Buddhist priests was this such a flame of...
I think that large-scale productions are kind of a breeding ground for these stories because there's so many more opportunities for these weird little things to happen, these mishaps that take on a life of their own, or these big accidents, again, that we have to sort of get our heads around. The other end of that spectrum is a guy like Lloyd Kaufman in Troma Studios. One of these mishaps would end Troma forever.
I don't want women with tiny babies coming through here, tripping over wires, bumping into people, right? You don't want people falling on cables, right? Especially little tiny babies.
Hello, I'm Lloyd Kaufman, president of Troma Entertainment, creator of The Toxic Avenger. And believe it or not, Troma Entertainment is the oldest independent movie studio in the world. 44 years of making movies of the future, like The Toxic Avenger, Class of Nukem High, Tromeo and Juliet. And now, Shakespeare's Shitstorm, our version of The Tempest. There's nothing more ego-oriented or narcissistic than making an auteur movie. Christ almighty. I'm sorry, start over. That didn't, acting there's not right. It's about the art, it's about the movie. I'm a total narcissist, but I'm motivated by film. Yes. Why are you calling me? You got assistant directors to talk to, no joke. Because we're in the middle of a shot, I'm sorry. I never was for the money. After Yale University, I had a job in California. I would have taken that. Instead, I took acid, and I decided to stay in New York and work for a shitty little company called Troma.
Brendan, you know we're gonna do the car crashing through the garage tomorrow? No, you cannot be there, nor can Caleb, or that guy, whatever his name is. Oh, this guy's up on a big ladder here, right?
Everybody ready? And action car.
Yes, sir. Can I get your view on how that stunt went?
The 3 rules of production. Troma rules of production. We're not posting.
Troma has 3 rules of production. Safety to humans, safety to people's property, and make a good film. We put up signs around the set. Action! And the words make a good movie are smaller than safety to humans and safety to people's property, because a movie is only a movie. Cut! Let's go back and get the close-ups. Don't run, don't run.
When you think about it, effects or stunts, or even film people in general, we do things that are inherently dangerous. And our safety record would put GM to shame or any other industry. So what I'm doing here is gonna make a fireball. That's a 1 pound propane tank that goes in. And we put a small black powder charge in the end that'll shoot that knife through there. A spark will go off and we'll get some magic happening. You can never get used to the amount of power you have as far as the explosions and fireballs, or bullet hits and things like of that nature, or even air and hydraulics and stuff like that, because it is a lot of power. And if you get too used to it, or you don't respect it enough, then generally the effects god comes down and has an unusual bowel movement in your Cheerios.
I was very worried about the kind of explosions that were going to be used in this picture. All of the positions of the explosions are very, very well laid out and communicated with everybody, especially with myself.
So this is a fairly big lifting charge for a very small mortar. But we'll put some debris on top so we can, throw it up in the air, and put some dust so we get some trails.
John asked me if I could move one of the huts more to the center of the village. I said, fine, so I had my team bring it over. Things are being said, and I'm walking around, and I find that there's an explosion underneath this hut. And I said, get special effects on the phone. I want him here now. I was pissed. So he came over to me, and he said, what's up, Rich? And I said, what the hell is this doing here? And why wasn't I told? So it's just da-da-da-da-da, and it's angled back at the hill, and it's okay. I said, that's not how it works. If I don't like it, it's not going to be here. Okay, I'm the man. So if anything else is on this set that I don't know about, you better fucking tell me. It's important for people to know how much work goes into trying to figure out and look at every possibility that could come into play before a big shot like this.
It was the last night of shooting. It was the final scene with the rescue of the 2 children.
The decision was made that we needed all 5 cameras shooting to get all 5 shots. And I sat there looking at this. The Huey coming in, the smell of gasoline filling the air. It was amazing. John Landis and I chose an area upstream, not too far from where Vic was going to walk by us.
The parents of the children asked, is this dangerous? And they were told by the producer who had hired them, oh no, it's just like a Disneyland ride. Vic Morrow felt it was physically demanding and a little bit overwhelming. But he felt that he couldn't afford to be too vociferous in challenging this powerful film director. So he did it against his better judgment.
Well, like I say, what I remember that night is how big the explosions were. Looking over at Vic coming across the water, the bombs going off around him. And I said, it's okay. We all planned this. We know where the helicopter's going to be. The Huey comes into play. And I realized that things are getting too close to the helicopter. And I turned around, I said, run.
The explosions were too close to the helicopter, damaged it, brought it down into the river. Killing Vic Morrow and the two children while their parents were standing watching this.
I turn, and there's the helicopter. On the ground, silence. And then there's the words, "Where's Vic? Where's the kids?" I don't really remember what I did after that. All I remember was seeing the children's parents, one hugging a tree, realizing that the children and the Vic were cut in half.
5 companies involved in the filming of The Twilight Zone have been fined a total of $62,000 for what a California safety board termed willful and serious safety violations in the helicopter crash that claimed 3 lives.
And there's still one more question to be considered. The children who were killed were working without permits. State labor officials may file criminal charges against the producers for illegally working the children at 2:30 in the morning.
Our officers would never have approved children 6 and 7 years of age to be in that area.
Well, Landis went to all 3 of the funerals, actually. He went to the children's funerals, and he went to Vic Morrow's funeral. And he very much wanted to speak at Vic Morrow's funeral and said something to the effect that film lives forever, Vic is immortal.
Tragedy strikes in an instant, but film is immortal. Perhaps we can take some solace in the knowledge that through his work in stage, television, and film, Vic lives forever.
The trial is just beginning. At issue, who's responsible for 3 deaths on the Twilight Zone movie set? Lawyers for the film's director blame an explosives expert, but Sandy Kenyon reports prosecutors disagree.
The trial got underway with 2 different accounts of how the tragedy occurred. The defense claimed a bizarre accident led to 3 deaths. The prosecution laid the blame on the filmmakers, accusing them of staging a dangerous stunt.
You have to use your own common sense. You cannot mix explosions, a helicopter, and human beings, let alone children, and not realize that there's a potential for danger.
The jury ultimately felt that the prosecutor had not proved that high standard of criminal negligence.
You don't prosecute people for unforeseeable accidents.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, John Landis, not guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
Outside the courtroom, the director's victory statement was tempered with remorse.
Almost 5 years ago, an accident happened on the set of one of my films that killed 3 people, and that none of this changes that.
They had to pay fines already for hiring the children illegally, but they were not convicted of crimes.
This is a terrible, terrible accident that obviously will cause pain and anguish to all of us for the rest of our lives.
They found them innocent, and I was married, 2 young kids, working hard in my career at the prime of one of the biggest producers in Hollywood, putting his hand around me and says, "How does it feel to be in the big time?" And my career was over in a blink of an eye.
I wasn't there at the Twilight Zone incident, but sometimes it's nobody's fault in particular. Everybody wants to point a finger at whose fault it was, but there's not always an obvious person to blame. Things happen. That's the nature of doing stunts.
If I was responsible for somebody getting seriously injured, It's just a fucking movie. That's why you don't do those things. You don't. It's just not worth it. I would stop making movies. I would be selling shoes or hot dogs or whatever, or maybe blowing my fucking brains out. I couldn't live with it. So it's a dangerous profession, movie making.
We're making a movie here. We're not, saving the world or splitting the atom or, taking a shot at the moon or something,
I think that Landis can't be held fully accountable for everything happening on that set. But you have to blame somebody, right? There has to be a reason for something terrible happening. That's the crux of all this cursed thinking. I think that the age of curses is ending because of the way our lives are recorded 24/7. We are moving away from these sort of urban legend, word-of-mouth stories because so little of our lives is word of mouth anymore. I think seeing these things changes how our minds process them. So it seems like an accident like on the set of The Twilight Zone is not the result of a curse, but maybe that accident is a curse. It's something that the effects guy has to live with. It's something that the casting director who hired those kids has to live with. Everybody on that set has been given a life sentence of having that accident in their brain pan for the rest of their lives.